The wind howled across the barren fields, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and despair. For years, Ezekiel Moore had fought against the land that once fed his father and grandfather. Now it yielded nothing but cracked earth and broken promises. Each dawn brought the same ritual: rise before the sun, mend fences, coax life from soil that no longer listened, and return home with calloused hands and an empty pocket. He was a poor farmer, poorer than most in the county, but too proud to abandon the farm that had been his family's inheritance. With every debt collector that came knocking, every letter stamped with red ink, his heart sank deeper into resignation. He often wondered if the land itself was cursed. On that particular evening, as the last light of day bled across the horizon, Ezekiel leaned against the wooden post of his dilapidated barn, watching his daughter, Mary, chase after a stray chicken. She was the only spark left in his fading world. 13 years old, curious and brave, Mary spoke often of hope, though Ezekiel no longer remembered what that word felt like. "Papa," she said, brushing her hair from her face, "do you ever think the land is hiding something from us?" Ezekiel chuckled wearily. "The only thing it hides is rain, child." But Mary didn't laugh. Her eyes had caught something unusual near the far end of the pasture, where the field met a cluster of gnarled oaks. The dying sun cast long shadows, and within those shadows Mary swore she saw a narrow passage snaking into the earth, half buried under thorns and roots. The farmer frowned, following her gaze. He had worked these fields his whole life. There should be no path there, only tangled brush and stone. With a lantern in hand, they crossed the pasture, the sound of crickets rising around them. And there, almost invisible to the untrained eye, was indeed a narrow trail, carved faintly into the soil, as if hidden for generations. It was no animal trail. The roots around it seemed intentionally cut, the stones arranged in a peculiar line, almost guiding the way forward. "Papa," Mary whispered, clutching his sleeve. "Someone made this, a long time ago." Ezekiel's lantern light revealed something else, a weathered symbol etched into the bark of the nearest oak, a circle intersected by a crooked cross. He had never seen it before, yet it stirred something deep in his chest, an unease he couldn't explain. That night, Ezekiel lay awake, haunted by the image of the hidden path. His farm was dying, his hope nearly gone, and yet this discovery pulled at him like a buried memory demanding to be unearthed. He did not know what lay at the end of that path, but a voice in the back of his mind whispered the same words again and again. "Follow it, before someone else does." Ezekiel rose before dawn, unable to sleep. The strange path tugged at him like a weight on his chest. He tried to push the thought away, focusing instead on the daily tasks, repairing the broken water pump, feeding the livestock, and checking the fields that refused to yield crops. But every motion felt hollow, meaningless, compared to the mystery that waited at the edge of the pasture. Mary noticed his restlessness. "You're thinking about it, aren't you, Papa?" she said, over their meager breakfast of stale bread and weak coffee. Ezekiel sighed. "I'm thinking I should know every inch of this land by now. Yet somehow there's a road I've never seen before. That don't sit right with me." Mary's eyes shone with excitement. "Then let's follow it. Maybe it's a sign." A sign. Ezekiel had stopped believing in signs long ago, but her words stirred something buried beneath years of hardship, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even hope. With a nod, he gathered supplies: a lantern, a length of rope, a small hatchet, and his grandfather's rusted revolver, long unused but still reliable enough to offer comfort. By mid-morning, father and daughter stood once more at the hidden trail. The path sloped downward, swallowed quickly by the shadows of twisted oaks and thick brush. It felt older than the farm itself, as though it had been carved into the land long before Ezekiel's family ever settled there. As they stepped into the passage, the air grew cooler, carrying the earthy smell of damp soil. Birds grew silent. The deeper they went, the more Ezekiel noticed strange details: stones arranged in deliberate patterns, tree trunks marked with faint carvings, roots cut cleanly as though by a sharp blade. "This wasn't made by chance," he muttered. Half an hour into their walk, they found the first sign that chilled Ezekiel's blood. At the base of a tree half buried in moss lay the remnants of an old lantern. Its metal frame was rusted through, but the design was unmistakably from another era, decades, perhaps even a century old. "Someone walked this path before us," Mary whispered. Ezekiel crouched, brushing away soil until his fingers hit something hard. He unearthed a small box, no bigger than his hand. The wood was rotted, but inside lay scraps of paper, so fragile they nearly disintegrated in his grip. He managed to make out a few words written in faded ink. "Keep going. The truth lies ahead." His heart pounded. Who had left this message? And why? They pressed forward. The path narrowed, winding like a snake through thick undergrowth. At times they had to hack away vines or crawl beneath fallen branches. And yet, despite the difficulty, Ezekiel felt guided, as though the way had been prepared for them, waiting all these years. At last, the trail opened into a small clearing surrounded by towering oaks. In the center stood a stone archway, half collapsed and covered in moss. It looked impossibly out of place, like a relic from another world. Symbols were carved into the stones, circles, crosses, spirals, and though Ezekiel couldn't decipher them, Mary traced them with her fingers, whispering, "It's beautiful." Near the base of the archway lay another object, a rusted spade, its handle worn smooth by countless hands. Ezekiel lifted it, and though it was heavy with decay, it seemed to pulse with meaning. Someone had dug here, long ago. He turned to Mary. "This ain't just a path, it's a trail leading to something buried, something hidden." Mary pointed to the ground beneath the archway. The soil there was darker, looser, as if disturbed. Ezekiel's breath caught. He set the spade into the earth and began to dig. Each thrust of the blade sent shivers through him. The soil gave way more easily than he expected, almost as though it wanted to be moved. After a few minutes, the spade struck wood with a hollow thunk. Mary gasped. Together, they cleared the dirt until the outline of a wooden chest emerged. It was large, reinforced with iron bands, and though weathered, it remained intact. A lock, blackened with age, sealed it shut. Ezekiel's hands trembled as he brushed dirt from the lid. His mind raced with possibilities: gold, silver, relics, or perhaps nothing but the forgotten junk of a wanderer. But the weight of the moment told him it was more, much more. Mary's voice was barely a whisper. "Papa, do you think this is what the path wanted us to find?" Before Ezekiel could answer, Rusty, their old hound who had followed at a distance, began to bark furiously. His growls echoed through the clearing, sharp and frantic. Ezekiel's instincts flared. He drew the revolver and scanned the tree line. From the shadows, a figure emerged. An old man, hunched and ragged, his beard long and white. His eyes burned with a strange light as he raised a trembling hand toward the chest. "You shouldn't have found it," the man rasped. "It was never meant for you." Ezekiel froze, the revolver shaking in his grip. Mary clutched his arm, her wide eyes locked on the stranger. The path had revealed its secret, but with it came a guardian, or perhaps a warning. And Ezekiel realized with a chill that their lives were about to change forever in ways he could not yet imagine. The old man's figure loomed at the edge of the clearing, his shadow stretching unnaturally long beneath the archway. Ezekiel's grip on the revolver tightened, though the weapon felt heavier than ever. He had no desire to use it, but instinct demanded he be ready. "You shouldn't have found it," the man repeated, his voice hoarse like gravel dragged across stone. "This path isn't yours. It was never meant for your eyes." Ezekiel steadied his voice. "Who are you, old man? And what do you know of this place?" The stranger limped closer, the lantern light catching the deep lines on his weathered face. His clothes were tattered but layered oddly, as though he had lived out here for decades, hidden from the world. His eyes, pale and unblinking, locked on the chest half buried at Ezekiel's feet. "My name doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is that box. It carries a burden you cannot bear." Mary's small hand clutched Ezekiel's sleeve. "Papa, maybe we should go," she whispered. But Ezekiel's pride flared. For years he had scraped by in misery, the land giving him nothing but disappointment. Now, at last, fate had placed something extraordinary before him. He would not walk away so easily. "This is my land," Ezekiel said firmly, "and anything buried beneath it belongs to me and my kin." The old man's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Is that what you think? That chest was sealed long before your family ever laid claim to these fields. Generations ago, men hid it here, for reasons you cannot begin to understand." His words unsettled Ezekiel, but he pressed on. "Then tell me what's inside. Tell me what has you skulking in the shadows, guarding this path like a ghost." For a long moment, the old man was silent. Then he lowered himself onto a mossy stone, his frail body trembling with exhaustion. "Inside that chest lies a history soaked in blood and greed. Coins of gold, artifacts of power, deeds to land stolen and fought over. Men died to protect it. Others killed to possess it. And now you dig it up, thinking it's some gift from heaven. Mary's eyes widened. Gold? Papa, it could save the farm. But Ezekiel saw something else in the old man's face. Fear. Genuine, bone-deep fear. Why are you still here? Ezekiel asked softly. Why guard it if it brings nothing but misery? The man's gaze fell to the soil. Because I was once like you. A farmer. Hungry, desperate, hopeful. I followed the whispers of the path, thinking it would deliver salvation. But when I opened that chest, salvation never came. Only ruin. Those who knew of it hunted me, drove me into these woods, forced me into a life of shadows. I stayed behind to warn others, to keep the curse contained. The word hung heavy in the clearing. Curse. Ezekiel's hand faltered on the revolver. His heart battled between two forces, the temptation of riches that could change his life forever, and the dread of repeating this old man's fate. Mary, however, stepped forward with the innocence of youth. Maybe it wasn't meant for you, she said gently. Maybe it was meant for us. Maybe that's why we found it now. The old man's eyes flashed with a mix of sorrow and anger. Child, you don't understand. Once you claim it, you can never turn back. The gold will draw men to you, men far worse than me. They will smell it in the air, taste it in the soil, and they will come. As his warning echoed, the night seemed to tighten around them. The wind picked up, rattling the branches. In the distance, Ezekiel swore he heard the faint echo of horses, though no rider should have been near at this hour. Mary tugged at his arm. Papa, please, open it. Just once. We have to know. Ezekiel's chest heaved. He had lived a life of struggle, scraping by with scraps while wealth lay buried beneath his very feet. Could he really walk away now, when the answer sat right before him? His decision came like a strike of lightning. He drove the spade against the lock. Once, twice, until the corroded metal cracked open with a shriek. The lid groaned as he pushed it upward, the lantern casting a golden glow across what lay within. Mary gasped. Even the old man turned his face away, as if unable to watch. Inside, neatly stacked and gleaming despite the passage of time, were coins of pure gold, dozens of them. Beside them lay a bundle of parchment, sealed with wax, and a dagger whose blade shimmered unnaturally in the light. Ezekiel's breath caught. He had never seen such wealth. A single coin could pay off every debt he owed. The entire chest could buy back his dignity, his future, his freedom. Mary reached for one of the coins, her fingers trembling with awe. But before she could touch it, the old man's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. No, he hissed. Do not touch it. Once you take from it, you are bound. You invite the eyes of those who have waited in the dark, watching, hungering. Mary flinched, pulling back. Ezekiel stared at the chest, torn between greed and terror. And then from the trees came the unmistakable sound of snapping branches. Multiple footsteps, voices. The old man's face went pale. It's too late, he whispered. They've found you. The clearing fell silent for the briefest moment after the old man's chilling words. Then came the rustle of boots through underbrush, the low murmur of voices, and the metallic rattle of spurs. Ezekiel's pulse quickened. Whoever they were close, and they were many. Mary clung to his arm, her eyes wide with fear. Papa, who are they? The old man's reply was little more than a whisper. The scavengers. They've been waiting. They always wait. Figures emerged from the darkness one by one, until half a dozen men stood at the edge of the clearing. Lanterns swung from their hands, casting long shadows across the mossy ground. Their clothes were rough, their faces hard, and each carried a rifle slung over his shoulder. At their head was a tall man with a black hat pulled low over his brow. His mustache was neatly trimmed, his boots polished, but his eyes gleamed with ruthless hunger. He tipped his hat at Ezekiel, a mocking smile playing at his lips. Well now, the man drawled. Looks like we ain't the only ones who heard the whispers of gold. Ezekiel raised the revolver, though his hand trembled. This is my land. You've no right to be here. The tall man chuckled, shaking his head. Land? Rights? Out here, rights belong to whoever's got the stronger hand. He nodded toward the chest. And I reckon that there belongs to me and my boys now. Mary pressed closer to her father, whispering, Don't let them take it. Ezekiel's heart thundered. He had faced drought, hunger, and debt collectors, but never armed thieves with greed in their eyes. He steadied his voice. "You'll not touch it, not while I draw breath." The men laughed. Their leader stepped forward, planting his boot atop the archway stone. "You've got spirit, farmer. I'll give you that. But spirit won't stop bullets." The old man suddenly rose, his frail body trembling but his voice sharp as a blade. "Leave now. That chest carries death for any who take it." The gang's laughter grew louder. One of them spat into the dirt. "Old fool's been rambling about curses for years. Still breathing, ain't you?" But their leader's eyes narrowed on the old man. "Funny thing, though. You've been hiding this place all this time, haven't you? Playing guardian. Makes a man wonder what else you're hiding." He gestured, and two of his men seized the old man by the arms. The keeper of the path struggled weakly, shouting, "Don't touch it! You don't know what you're unleashing." Ezekiel aimed the revolver, torn between protecting the chest and the man who had tried to warn him. He had 6 bullets against 6 rifles. The math was clear, yet something inside him refused to yield. Mary's voice quivered beside him. "Papa, we can't fight them all." The leader knelt by the chest, brushing dirt from the golden coins that gleamed within. His greedy grin widened. "Well, gentlemen, looks like fortune finally smiled on us. Riches beyond measure." As he reached in, Mary cried out, "Stop!" Her voice cracked through the night like a whip. Every man turned to her, surprised by the fire in the child's tone. "That gold ain't yours," she shouted, tears brimming in her eyes. "It was hidden for a reason. You'll curse us all if you take it." The men only laughed harder, but their leader's smile faded just slightly. He studied her, then Ezekiel, then the trembling old man. Something in their fear unsettled him. Still, greed won. He snatched a coin from the chest, holding it high. Cursed or not, gold's still gold. The instant the coin left the chest, the air shifted. The lantern flame sputtered. A cold wind ripped through the clearing, and the ground beneath the archway groaned like something ancient stirring. The horses tethered nearby whinnied in terror. The old man shouted, "You fools! You've woken it!" Before Ezekiel could ask what he meant, the ground cracked and a low rumble spread through the earth. The archway stones vibrated, dust raining down from their mossy surfaces. The very clearing seemed to breathe with menace. The gang faltered, unease breaking through their bravado. The leader pocketed the coin quickly, barking orders. "Grab the chest! We're taking it!" 2 men bent to lift the box, but the soil clung to it like claws, refusing to release it fully. As they strained, their lantern toppled, flames licking at the dry undergrowth. Panic flared, the clearing filled with smoke and chaos. Ezekiel seized the moment, shoving Mary behind him. He fired a warning shot into the air. The crack split the night, and for a heartbeat, silence returned. His voice rang out with desperate fury. "This ends now. Take another step and I swear, curse or no curse, I'll send you to your graves." The gang hesitated, torn between greed and fear. The leader sneered, yet doubt flickered in his eyes. Behind him, the old man gasped, his captors loosening their grip as the earth trembled again. Then from beyond the trees came the distant sound of hooves, more riders fast approaching. The gang spun, uncertain whether friend or foe was on the way. Ezekiel's pulse hammered. Whoever was coming could tip the balance. Allies, or another pack of scavengers drawn by the whispers of gold. Either way, the night was far from over. The sound of hooves grew louder, echoing through the woods like a drumbeat of war. The gang leader's smirk faltered as he turned toward the noise. His men raised their rifles nervously, lantern light trembling in their hands. Ezekiel held his revolver steady, sweat dripping down his brow. He didn't know whether the riders were friend or foe, but one truth pressed on his chest. If he let the chest fall into the wrong hands, he and Mary were finished. The old man, still struggling in the grip of 2 bandits, rasped desperately, "You don't understand. The chest isn't what it seems. It was never meant for wealth. It was meant for chains." "Chains?" Ezekiel muttered, his eyes darting to the box. The old man's voice cracked like a whip. "It was buried to hide the sins of powerful men. Deeds stolen from farmers like you. Gold used to buy silence. Blood money. That's why it's cursed, because it was bought with the lives of innocents." Mary's small voice rose, trembling but fierce. "Papa, that's why the path showed us, so we'd know the truth." The gang leader barked a laugh, masking his unease. "Truth? Child, truth is what a man makes with a full pocket and a loaded gun. Now step aside." Before Ezekiel could answer, the riders burst into the clearing, 3 men on horseback wearing sheriff's badges that gleamed in the firelight. They reined their horses sharply, rifles already aimed. "Hands in the air!" the sheriff bellowed. "Step away from that chest!" Chaos erupted. The bandits scrambled, some raising rifles, others hesitating. The leader snarled, drawing his revolver, while the men holding the old guardian released him in panic. Gunfire split the night. The crack of rifles thundered through the clearing, sparks flying as bullets struck stone and tree bark. Horses reared, men shouted, and smoke from the burning undergrowth thickened into a choking haze. Ezekiel pulled Mary to the ground, shielding her with his body. He fired blindly toward the gang, each shot ripping from his revolver with desperate resolve. One bandit cried out, collapsing against the archway stones. The sheriff's men pressed forward, their voices cutting through the smoke. "Drop your weapons, now!" But the gang leader refused. With a roar, he lunged for the chest, yanking at the gold within. His fingers clutched at the coins greedily, stuffing them into his coat. The old man staggered forward, his voice breaking. "Stop! You'll doom us all!" The leader spat. "To hell with curses!" He raised his revolver toward Ezekiel, but before he could fire, the ground beneath the archway split open with a deafening crack. The chest lurched, the soil swallowing it halfway as if the earth itself sought to reclaim it. The golden coins spilled out, tumbling across the ground, glowing in the lantern light like drops of sunlight. And then came the sound, a low, guttural moan rising from deep below, as though centuries of buried voices cried out in anguish. The clearing shook, stones crumbling from the archway. The gang faltered, terror replacing greed. Even the sheriff's men froze, staring in horror. Ezekiel felt Mary's hand clutch his with iron strength. "Papa," she whispered, "we have to end it." The old man dropped to his knees beside the half-swallowed chest, tears streaming down his face. It must be sealed. It was never treasure. It was a prison. For greed, for blood, for everything evil those men did. If it escapes, it consumes. Ezekiel understood then. The chest was more than wood and iron. It was a vessel, a reminder of sins buried in secrecy, a lure to test the hearts of those who found it. And now it was awake. The gang leader, desperate and wild-eyed, shoved coins into his pockets, screaming, "It's mine, all mine." He ignored the trembling earth, the moaning voices, the flames creeping closer. Ezekiel rose, rage and clarity burning through him. He leveled his revolver. "You'll take nothing from this land but the dirt that covers your grave." He fired. The bullet struck true. The leader staggered back, dropping his revolver as blood spread across his chest. He fell against the archway, his pockets spilling gold that clattered into the flames. His final breath left him as the earth swallowed the coins whole. Silence followed, brief, fragile silence before the ground shuddered once more. The chest sank deeper, dragging the remaining gold with it, until only the edge of its lid remained visible. The old man crawled forward, placing both hands on the soil, whispering a prayer older than Ezekiel had ever heard. Slowly, impossibly, the earth settled, the rumbling ceased. The flames dimmed, smoke rising into the night sky. The sheriff lowered his rifle, his eyes wide. What in God's name just happened here? Ezekiel holstered his revolver, his hands still shaking. Something we were never meant to find. Mary clung to him, her voice trembling but steady. "We can't let anyone dig it up again, Papa. Ever." The old man turned to Ezekiel, his face etched with exhaustion but also relief. "The path chose you not to claim it, but to bury it again, to protect your land and your bloodline from repeating my mistakes." Ezekiel looked at Mary, then at the scorched ground where the chest had vanished. He felt the weight of generations pressing on him, the hunger, the greed, the endless toil. For the first time he understood that his family's true inheritance wasn't buried gold, but the choice of what to do with it. And tonight, he had chosen. Dawn crept over the horizon, its pale light washing away the smoke and shadows of the night before. The clearing lay in eerie stillness. Only the charred remnants of the fire, the shattered stones of the archway, and the faint smell of earth newly disturbed bore witness to the chaos that had unfolded. Ezekiel stood with Mary at his side, their hands still clasped. The sheriff's men had rounded up the surviving bandits and were preparing to haul them back to town in chains. The sheriff himself, a grizzled man with tired eyes, lingered near Ezekiel. "You've got a strange kind of luck, farmer," he said, his voice low. "If we hadn't heard the shots and ridden out here, you and your girl would be lying cold in this dirt." Ezekiel nodded wearily. "Luck had little to do with it, Sheriff. Some things just don't belong to us." The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then tipped his hat and rode off with his men. leaving Ezekiel, Mary, and the old guardian alone in the clearing. The old man knelt by the scorched soil where the chest had vanished. His gnarled hands traced the ground like one tracing the face of a lost loved one. "It sleeps again," he murmured. "But only because of you." Ezekiel crouched beside him. "I only did what needed doing." The old man shook his head. "No, you chose. That makes all the difference. Many men before you chose greed. You chose to bury it, to protect what cannot be owned." Ezekiel looked at Mary, who leaned against him, exhausted but unbroken. In her eyes he saw the future, one not bound by coins or curses but by something stronger, hope. "Then what do we do now?" Mary asked softly. The old man rose with difficulty, leaning heavily on his cane. His eyes, though weary, glimmered with something like peace. "Now you live, you tend your land, you remember what you saw here, and you teach her," he gestured at Mary, "that the greatest treasures are not buried in earth, but in the hearts that walk upon it." Ezekiel felt those words sink into him like rain into dry soil. For years he had cursed his life, cursed the barren land that refused to yield. But now he understood. The land had not failed him. It had tested him. It had led him to a truth deeper than gold. As the sun climbed higher, Ezekiel and Mary began the long walk back to their farmhouse. The fields stretched out before them, vast and empty, yet no longer hopeless. Every broken fence, every withered stalk seemed less like a curse and more like a challenge, a reminder that life's worth was not measured in coins, but in the sweat of honest hands and the love that carried them forward. That evening, Ezekiel stood on his porch, watching Mary chase after the chickens, her laughter ringing through the twilight. For the first time in years, he smiled without forcing it. The weight that had burdened his shoulders seemed lighter, replaced by something he hadn't felt since his youth, faith. He thought of the gold, the dagger, the deeds buried deep beneath the soil. He thought of the gang leader's lifeless eyes, the sheriff's confusion, the old guardian's weary relief. And he thought of his own father, who had died poor but proud, never abandoning the land he loved. Perhaps that was the true inheritance. Not wealth, not curses, but the strength to endure, to rise each day and plant seeds even when the sky withheld its rain. Mary came to his side, slipping her small hand into his calloused one. "Papa," she said, "do you think the path will ever show itself again?" Ezekiel looked toward the distant grove of oaks, now quiet and still. He felt a shiver run through him, but he shook his head. "No, child. The path has given us what we needed, and now it sleeps." Mary leaned her head against his arm. "Then I'm glad it chose us." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "So am I, Mary. So am I." The wind whispered across the fields, gentle and cool, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. Ezekiel breathed it in, letting it fill his lungs, his soul. For the first time in his life, he did not fear the dawn. And though the world would never know the secret buried beneath his farm, Ezekiel knew the truth, that the greatest treasure he could ever hope to possess was already his daughter's laughter, the land beneath his feet, and the strength to face whatever lay ahead. For a poor farmer who once thought himself cursed, that was enough, more than enough.